Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 290, The Embezzler. Part 1. In January 1892, Henry Geary was charged with embezzling funds from his employer, a solicitor's firm in Melbourne. He was 23 years old, respectfully connected with a wife and family. It was revealed that gambling was the cause of his ruin. Henry Valentine Joseph Geary was born in Kew, Victoria in 1868 to Joseph Geary and Annie Gordon. Joseph Geary was an inspector of public schools and later became a journalist. Joseph Geary and Annie Gordon married in 1868, and in 1892 they were living at Canterbury, Victoria. Henry was an accountant and married Mabel Sarah Phyllis Gaylor in Victoria in 1888. Mabel had been born in Hobart, Tasmania, and her family moved over to Victoria in about 1880. Mabel's paternal grandfather was a convict. They had one daughter, Olive Dagmar Geary, on the 11th of July 1891 in Richmond before his conviction, who died in 1892, aged 7 months, in Elstonwick. On the 14th of January 1892, the barrier miner in Broken Hill reported from Victoria that Henry Valentine Joseph Geary, the son of a journalist, was committed for trial today on a charge of stealing £1,064 from Ellison and Simpson solicitors, for whom the accused was a clerk. He was receiving a good salary, but said it had all gone to the bookmakers and the rest had gone with it. In committing the accused to take his trial, Mr. Panton said the case was one which showed the urgent necessity which existed for the introduction of the totaliser into this colony. If this machine, he continued, were worked, there would be less embezzlement. Since the accused was arrested, his only child has died. The Melbourne Herald outlined the case in more detail on the 14th of January 1892. The embezzlement boom, Geary before the City Court. Henry Valentine Joseph Geary, a respectable-looking man of 28 years of age, was brought before the City Court this morning on several charges of stealing from the firm Ellison and Simpson solicitors, by which he was employed as an accountant. The total amount of the embezzlement was £1,064. Thomas Ellison of the firm Ellison and Simpson solicitors gave evidence to the effect that the accused was a clerk in his employ as an accountant, and he kept the cash and checkbooks of the firm. On the 6th, the witness called Geary into his room and asked for the books, as he wished to go over them. The accused said that the bank book was away at the bank, being made up, but he left his other books. The next day, in consequence of receiving a note from the manager of the bank, the witness sent for Geary. He said there is a cheque for £282 dated the 4th of January, purporting to be signed by me. The accused said, I forged that cheque. This was in presence of Detective Teague. The witness said, you forged that cheque, and the accused said yes. The witness then turned to another cheque worth £180 dated the 10th of December and asked who signed it. The accused replied that he did. The witness asked, where has the money gone to? And the accused replied, gone to the bookmakers. The witness then showed Geary a letter from the bank to the effect that the account was £1,900 overdrawn. The witness said there is a difference of £600 between the bank book and the cash book. What has become of that? The accused replied, I have taken it. The witness asked, have you forged cheques for that amount? And Geary replied, not the whole of it. Asked whether he could give a list of the cheques that he'd forged, the accused said he could, and then he took the bank book away. A few minutes afterwards he came back with the book marked of the cheques that he'd taken. 10th of October, £104. 31st of October, £475. 2nd of November, £42. 13th of November, £232. 28th of November, £416, 11 shillings and 2 pence. 10th of December, £180, 1 shilling 2 pence. 4th of January, £282. The witness had noticed the butt of another cheque for £20 turned out, and the accused said that it was not his. Witness replied that someone must have taken it, and that the list made £1,431, 12 shillings and 4 pence, without the £20, which the accused disclaimed. The witness then said there seems to be a deficiency of £150 further. What has become of that? Geary continued his admissions and said that he'd received money in the office which he had not paid into the bank. He said he was able to give a list and that they had all been to the credit of different people in the ledgers, but did not appear in the cash book. The majority of the cheques were signed in the name of Mr. Simpson, but were very badly executed. The signatures did not resemble either those of his own, that is, the witnesses, or his partners. What salary did you give the accused? I believe it was £2.10 per week. When did he come into your employ? In February last year. Do you know how old he is? He responded with, he says he's only 23 years of age. Are you aware he has a wife? Yes, he's married and has 2 or 3 children, I'm told. Yes, I understand that is correct. You did not discover the frauds yourself? No, they were discovered through the letter from the bank. Detective Teague stated that the accused was arrested at Paran and informed him that he'd taken the cheques and that he'd taken others in order to endeavour to win it back over at the races. The accused reserved his defence and was committed to take his trial at the next sitting of the General Sessions. Before being removed to the cells, Mr. Greaves put in a plea for light bail. The accused showed no disposition to get away from the colony, and even if he did, he would be unable to because his wife and family were here and the youngest child was in the hands of a doctor. In fact, his family had required medical attendance for a long time past. Since the accused has been arrested, one of his children had died and the prisoner's wife was also very ill. Mr. Panton agreed that he should be fixed at one surety of £250 and the accused himself in a like amount. In the Melbourne Argus on the 15th of January 1892, Henry Valentine Joseph Geary, a solicitor's clerk, 23, was presented before the City Court yesterday on a charge of stealing monies amounting to over £1,100 from Ellison and Simpson solicitors of Bourke Street West. And now that he takes the stand in the felon's dock is a disgraced and ruined man. Mr. G. Hill's solicitor said the prisoner at one time was in his employment and he was a steady and industrious young man. He was sentenced to 3 counts of forging and uttering, and the sentence was to be served concurrently. At the time of his incarceration, his wife Mabel was living with Mrs. Gaylor, her mother, in Brighton. It also says that the prisoner's brother, George, under the name of George Kilfoyle, was also in jail in 1893. Henry was released from jail on the 26th of May 1894 by remission. After his release, a daughter May was born in about 1894 and Mabel Henry Valentine Geary was born in 1889 in Scoresby North. On the 27th of May 1896 in the Coolgardie Miner in Western Australia, Mr. Valentine Geary has been appointed as our agent in Perth and Fremantle for the collection of accounts and to receive advertisements, and that was written by W.E. Clare. On the 20th of July 1898 in the Perth Daily News, it stated that Valentine Geary is an accountant in the employ of Mr. John Horgan, and formerly he was an accountant for the firm of Horgan and Pennyfather. Another child, Francis Henry William Geary, was born in September 1898 at Subiaco, Western Australia. On the 6th of February 1899 in the Perth Daily News, the friends of Mr. Valentine Geary are respectfully informed that the remains of his dearly beloved son will move to the place of interment at the Church of England Cemetery in Perth. Francis died on the 5th of February 1899, only 5 months old. On the 9th of May 1899 in the Perth Western Australian, in the Supreme Court in regards to bankruptcy, Valentine Geary has unsecured creditors worth £381 2 shillings and 11 pence, creditors partly secured £220, less estimated value of securities £215, liabilities on accommodation bills £20, with a total debt of £616 2 shillings and 11 pence, assets £536 and 5 shillings, with a deficiency of £79 7 shillings and 11 pence. He had 2,500 shares in the Elberfall GM company that he valued at £312 and 10 shillings. The cause of the deficiency was chiefly the depressed state of the mining market and losses in speculation. He said he first came to the colony in 1895. He is at present acting as an accountant for a firm of solicitors. When he came to the colony, he had a few pounds. His salary was £200 per annum. He made money in connection with flotations, the profits from which were directed into other channels. He was then acting as an agent for the Coolgardie Miner and the Coolgardie Pioneer, which brought him £250 a year. He had incurred large liabilities in connection with shares. He would make an effort to prepare a statement giving his losses in share transactions. His wife had always had a separate estate from his. She had a house at Subiaco. She had purchased an interest in a brewery and the Stockyard Creek Company. He had paid a deposit in connection with the furniture for the house, but he paid nothing for the building. He did not hand over to her the interest in the Stockyard Creek. So far as his wife's real estate went, nothing had been brought with the money handed over to her by him. As to the personal estate, he paid £20 as a deposit on the furniture for the Subiaco house. It was not purchased in his name. He had given his wife money from time to time. She paid all of the rest of the instalments on the furniture herself. The immediate cause of his insolvency was pressure of creditors. His present salary was £200. He only wanted time to pay. He would undertake to pay his liabilities within 6 months. On the 8th of August 1899 in the Perth West Australian, the debtor was examined by Mr Robertson on behalf of a creditor. In the course of his examination, he said that Mrs Geary had a house at Subiaco that cost £900 and the land about £1,260, which she purchased with her own money. He had not transferred money to his wife. She was entitled to certain interests under her grandfather's will and had obtained money from that source. The debtor, who appeared on his behalf, withdrew a statement which he had made in the course of a former examination, reflecting on Mr Allison's solicitor of Melbourne. And on the 17th of September 1902 in the North Coolgardie Herald and Miners Daily News. Settlement agreed on in Perth. An action brought against the Perth Tramways Company by Valentine Geary and another in which £1,400 was claimed for personal injuries was heard at the Supreme Court today. Mr Harvey explained that Mr and Mrs Geary were seriously injured through a tram running into a cab occupied by them. A settlement has been agreed to and Mrs Geary was to receive £500 and Geary £12 10 shillings including costs. On the 7th of December 1902 in the Perth Sunday Times. During the past few days, a glaring case of welshing on the part of a Perth punter has come to light, and many of our best-known bookmakers have been victimised by him. The bold, bad backer is Mr Valentine Geary. Valentine Geary punted with the proceeds of damages awarded from the tram company. At Helena Vale a fortnight ago, he punted on credit and did not put in an appearance on settling day to square up. The amounts he owes are to P. O'Connor £45, C. Clark £40, F. Bell £35, J. Maroney £98, W. Sparrow £25, F. Watt £58, totalling £301. Valentine, the non-paying punter, was sought for by the fielders, and to one he gave a cheque that was valueless, and to the others he said he'd get some money during the week, that he would punt with it at Canning Park on the 29th and settle with his betting creditors immediately afterwards. Geary was at Canning but did not punt, though his partner, Mr Gaylor, was on the job apparently for him. On the following settling day, Geary was again sought after, and his partner said he'd gone to Northam to raise the wind and would be back during the week to square up. Subsequent disclosures show that Mrs Geary has sold private property to the value of £1,900 and cleared in the RMS Himalaya to the east. It is also surmised that Geary has gone east also, as there's no trace of him that can be found in Western Australia. They did skip town, but they actually went to South Africa, where the family remained until 1908. Then in 1909, they were in Sydney. Valentine was charged with running a mutual loan lottery racket. Valentine had bigger and better plans, and he teamed up with Archibald Forsyth and started a company called Valentine Geary Limited. This was to be his mother company to serve all the other companies he created, such as Brooker's Colours Limited, Sormo Limited, Dad's Millions Gold Syndicate Limited, Newcastle Belmont Colliery and the Cardiff Shipping Company. Now, Valentine Geary Limited were experts in mining and provided services such as bookwork, secretarial work, brokers and vendors. In 1910, the prospectus was issued for a new company called Newcastle Belmont Colliery, in which Val Geary Limited was vendor, broker and secretary, and he was also one of the directors of this company. He had promised the world in his prospectus to influence shareholders, knowing that the previous coal company had failed. Soon all the shares had been taken up, and the Newcastle Belmont Colliery had capital to start mining at Belmont, in which they would take over all of the Cardiff Coal Company's workings, coal leases and land acquisitions, being 299 acres. Then Geary realised he needed to purchase a vessel to freight the coal, and he purchased the Oroka under Valentine Geary Limited, in which they entered an agreement with Newcastle Belmont Colliery to carry its coal for 5 shillings a tonne. People were now realising that Geary was secretary of the Newcastle Belmont Colliery, so he formed a new company called Cardiff Shipping Company to carry the coal. This looks much better than to have its secretary carry the coal. Valentine had his eyes on neighbouring coal blocks belonging to Minter and Simpson. After some negotiations, Geary Limited secured 3 blocks from Minter and Simpson and parted with the block to the Cardiff Shipping Company for a much higher price. The Cardiff Shipping Company was now to enter the business of coal mining on adjoining land to the Belmont men. So the Newcastle Belmont Colliery directors met with the Cardiff Shipping Company directors and said, please don't enter into competition with us. Give us the option to buy back our block at a higher price and have the rights to purchase the whole output of the mine at a price agreed upon and have the freighting of the whole output of the mine. The Cardiff Shipping Company agreed, and Geary met with the Newcastle Belmont Colliery secretary, and an agreement was signed, sealed and delivered. The winner out of this was Geary Limited, who scored 2 blocks of land and 10% of earnings from the Cardiff Shipping Company. Geary Limited was now in possession of 2 blocks provided by the Newcastle Belmont Colliery and was able to pay the purchase price agreed upon with the Cardiff Shipping Company, providing the Cardiff Shipping Company is able to pay the price agreed upon with Geary Limited, and providing likewise that Geary Limited pays the balance to Minter and Simpson. This type of dovetail payment system was engineered by Geary. This failed in 1913, but before it did, the 2 blocks were paid in full by Geary Limited, thus gaining the title and the availability to subdivide. So on the 30th of November 1909 in the Sydney Morning Herald, it says Valentine Geary Limited has been registered with a capital of £30,000 in shares of £1 each to carry on the business of mining experts, company promoters and financiers. On the 12th of May 1910 in the Newcastle Morning Herald and Miners Advocate, the well-known coastal steamer Oroka has changed hands, having been sold by the North Coast Company to Valentine Geary Limited. It's a steel steamer of 170 tonne. She was built at Balmain in 1897. The intention of the new owners is to employ the Oroka in the coal trade between Lake Macquarie and Sydney. And on the 24th of July 1910 in the Sydney Sunday Times, premium application list now open and rapidly filling. The Newcastle Belmont Collieries Limited, incorporated on the 17th of May 1910, authorised capital of £50,000. This company is now offering 495,500 contributing shares of 1 shilling each. The company's successful enterprise is too well and favourably known to necessitate superfluous advertising. A coal-producing colliery with 10 million tonne of the best Newcastle coal outcropping onto the company's wharf site, free from payment of any royalty and producible at the minimum of cost. This company's colliery is producing and selling hundreds of tonne of coal per month. It has millions upon millions of tonne of the best Newcastle coal to work, and the company has contracted to provide consignments of coal amounting to 1,000 tonne of coal per day, and as from the first day of January 1912, which is less than 18 months hence. The establishment of large coal yards and depots in Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide is contemplated, and it's anticipated that this company will be able to profitably land and sell the best Newcastle coal in Sydney or Melbourne at prices far below anything known. These prices will be capable of yielding a most handsome profit to the shareholders. Samples of coal from the company's colliery may be inspected at the office at Scott's Chambers, 94 Pitt Street. Substantial dividends and much larger premiums are anticipated in the near future. Prompt application is absolutely essential to secure an allotment. All allotments will be made in strict priority on application. Call or write for the company's first premium prospectus containing forms of application and expert reports, which are obtainable upon the offices of Valentine Geary Limited at Scott Chambers, 94 Pitt Street, Sydney. So that was a huge advertisement that would have cost him quite a bit of money, and it seems very enticing to prospective shareholders. On the 10th of December 1910, in the Sydney Morning Herald, the Oil Suction Gas Patents Limited has been registered with a capital of £6,000 in shares of £100 each to acquire from Valentine Geary Limited and KM Gibson certain inventions in relation to the manufacture of gas. On the 18th of March 1910, in the Maitland Weekly Mercury, Valentine Geary has reported striking a reef assaying 10 to 15 ounces of gold at Brisbane Valley, 9 miles west of Oberon. On the 9th of July 1911, in the Sydney Truth, Ventures of Valentine, Geary's genius for garnering googies. In our issue of the 14th of May, we stated we'd have a few words to say about the ventures of Valentine, meaning thereby the wondrous wealth, winners of that financial genius who is known to financiers of Pitt Street as Valentine Geary. V. Geary, LSD, will be remembered by our readers as the gentleman who suddenly dropped down in our midst and contrived a wondrous mutual loan scheme, which he convinced himself and others could by no species of legal reasoning be construed into gambling in any shape or form. The police sniffed suspiciously at his mutual loan racket. Court proceedings resulted, and notwithstanding an appeal, the case went against himself and his directors. Veld was not a millionaire, except probably in his mind. However, he realised that a sleepy old city like Sydney, a man of his abilities, of Val Geary was a good enough proposition to float into. No sooner did he have subscribers that Val Geary floated. The ex-mutual loaner became a commercial proposition to be taken seriously. Valentine Geary Limited was registered as a company with a capital of £30,000 on the 26th of November 1909, the purpose of the company being to acquire the business of mining experts, company promoters and financiers carried on by Valentine Geary and Archibald Forsyth. Shortly after the flotation of Val Geary Limited, there was issued the prospectus of Brooker's Colours Limited with a capital of £7,000 in £1 shares. The company was formed for the purpose of acquiring from Val Geary rights in which he acquired from Mrs. Mushelli to the freehold of 50 acres of land on the Hawkesbury River, and also Val Geary's rights to all mineral and other rights, benefits and privileges appertaining to the land. Also all houses, buildings, furnaces, machinery and plant, and business of a paint and pigment factory established on the said property for the past 5 years under the title of G. Brooker and Company, Waratah Paintworks. The report of V. Geary says that after an exhaustive investigation coupled with systematic sampling supported by practical tests of material taken from enormous bodies of ferrous deposits upon the Hawkesbury River properties, I immediately secured all valuable rights relating to the purpose of founding a company to purchase the work on the property. Upon the 50 acres of freehold land, there was found ferrous deposits to successfully use for the manufacture and production of mineral pigments and paints of the finest colours and quality. The deposit has in places which prove to a depth of 10 feet without reaching the bottom, so it's obviously impossible to estimate the millions of tonnes that may be available below the surface by computing what is actually in sight. There should be a yield of well over 1 million tonne. If it were dug out and shipped in its crude state, it would be ready for sale for London and European markets for $3 to $5 per tonne. For the past 5 years, there's been a constantly increasing demand for the product, and this is chiefly attributable to its purity and excellence of quality, the comparative freedom from grit, and its high staining powers. It is also probable that the deposit will be proven very valuable for the tanning of hides and leather with the chrome process. A long list of pigments could be produced. Of the £7,000 capital, the vendor was to take £3,000 fully paid up of £1 shares and £400 cash. 2,000 contributing shares were offered to the public and 2,000 were held in reserve. Months later, inquiring what paints have been produced and what dividends have been paid, alas, the colours on the 50-acre paddock appeared to be illusionary. So far we can ascertain that there is a debt somewhere in the vicinity of £1,000. These debts have been liquidated by Valentine Geary Limited, and it must be borne in mind that there are about 2,000 shares at £1 unallotted. Expert opinion says it puts the estimate very far removed from 1 million tonne. The report from the Department of Mines says there is not one word concerning paint-making deposits at the Hawkesbury. The prospectus says that it's been worked for 5 years and that a collection of the colours had been sent to the Franco-British exhibition where it was awarded the Grand Prix. But one's curiosity is pricked as to why the Mines Department overlooked such a valuable wealth of mineral material on that 50-acre patch. What the shareholders will be interested in is the exact date of when the company's shares are going to rise to a phenomenal market price that's been promised in the prospectus, and what time it will start to carry those interim dividends. The paintworks were recently destroyed by fire, consequently no paint can be produced for the present. In January 1910, we find Geary posing as a mining authority and giving his opinion on wonderful possibilities of the Macquarie goldfields. A prospectus was launched for a limited company with a capital of £150,000 in 300,000 shares at 10 shillings each. The report by Geary contained optimistic phrases such as phenomenally rich gold, consistently handsome returns, great financial success, and profitable results. The company is now being worked by a company that superseded Geary Limited and affected the flotation. Now to refer to the prospectus of Solmo Limited. This secured the rights to an invention known as the plunger for regulating pressure of aerated waters made in bulk form. The capital was £25,000 in £25,001 shares. Various descriptions and estimates led up to the statement that the gross profit for the year would be £5,200, and after all expenses are allowed for, there would be a net profit of 14%. It was proposed to call the new beverage Solmo Soda Water. It does not appear that Solmo Soda has taken, and the concern never went to flotation. Though the foregoing particulars of various concerns may not prove emphatically that Geary is a money spinner, yet we think that those who like to hear about our public companies and the flotation of companies will find more than a passing interest in the brief review of the venture of Valentine. And a week later, there is a continuation of the ventures of Valentine. In May 1910, there was a prospectus for the Newcastle Belmont Collieries Limited. This was a company with a nominal capital of £50,000 in 1 million shares of a bob at a time. And it was confidently anticipated that the company's shares will speedily reach a very high premium on the present issue price, and that it would be adequately supported by results which would be accruing from the inception of the company's operations. The company was registered in May 1910, and the prospectus provided. However, within a few months, 104,500 shares appeared to have been applied for. These, when paid, would have made a little over £5,000, which would have had £4,725 towards general working and working expenses after the vendor got his £500 cash out. The company, being incorporated by the financial genius of Geary, started to shine. The practical task of winning coal and getting it to the market had to be faced. The same problem had puzzled the Cardiff Coal Company, who had worked the coal mine but were forced to abandon it as a consequence of the difficulty of getting the coal out of Lake Macquarie to the Sydney market in quantities sufficient to pay. Geary was not daunted by the failure of the previous company to overcome these difficulties, and they secured a vessel, the Euroka, to freight the coal from Lake Macquarie to Sydney. Now a brand new shipping company was formed, the Cardiff Shipping Company Limited. For all practical purposes, it was identical with Geary Limited. Geary Limited scored by the arrangement to get 10% of the gross freight to be earned by the Cardiff Shipping Company, and is left the possessor of 2 blocks of land, which it will not pay 1 penny out of pocket, providing the Belmont Company is able to pay the purchase price agreed upon with the Cardiff Shipping Company. Readers will begin to imagine that Valentine Geary is a sort of financial tapeworm or rabbit. With a view in getting more brass, a premium prospectus was issued in which the public were kindly invited to pay 15 pence for the unallotted bob shares. The public did not respond to this prospectus as anticipated. We understand they took up something like 50,000 to 70,000 shares out of the 495,500 shares offered. On the 30th of July 1911 in the Sydney Truth, there was a letter to the editor from one of the shareholders. Sir, as a shareholder in this Newcastle Belmont Company, I think that the thanks of all the contributing shareholders are due to you for your exposure of the situation. In what you state is true, then Valentine Geary Limited, a secretary to the Newcastle Belmont Collieries Limited, has been guilty of a gross breach of trust and has made a profit of 2 blocks of coal land for itself, which should belong to the Newcastle Belmont Collieries Limited. It is time that the shareholders took immediate steps to have a thorough investigation made into all the company's affairs, and if the investigation shows what you state is true, action should be at once taken to remove the secretary from its position and transfer the other 2 blocks to the Newcastle Belmont Collieries Limited. On the face of it, the transaction looks peculiar, and I would like some of the other shareholders to express an opinion on the matter. On 31st of August 1912 in the Singleton Argus, while Mrs. Valentine Geary and her daughter were out for a walk late Monday afternoon, a thief broke into their Mossman home, departing with £20 worth of jewellery. It was Mr. Geary who first became aware of the robbery. He arrived home at 6:30 to find the front door lock broken and the door standing ajar. Inside, 2 of the bedrooms were in disorder, and the inspection of the dressing table drawers revealed the absence of a diamond ring, 3 bangles, 2 brooches and 2 watch chains. On the 4th of October 1913, in the Commonwealth of Australia Gazette, I, Thomas Baron Denman, the Governor-General, acting with the advice of the Federal Executive Council, hereby appoint a wharf at Pyrmont Bay in Sydney to be known as Valentine Geary's Wharf, to be situated at Murray Street, Pyrmont Bay, Pyrmont. In 1913, the Euroka was wrecked and the Newcastle Belmont Colliery Limited was bankrupt and went into liquidation. Many shareholders were unsatisfied of the shonky duties of their secretary, Val Geary Limited, and complained that they had been wrong done by. On the 22nd of October 1913, there was an article outlining the Euroka's sinking. In Sydney, on Monday night, the steamer Euroka, 170 tonne, for many years in the North Coast trade, and for the last 3 years owned by Valentine Geary and Company, and employed in the coal trade between Sydney and Lake Macquarie, left Lake Macquarie yesterday morning. The sea was lumpy, and at about 10 o'clock the steamer sprung a leak. The water was gaining at an alarming rate, and at 5 o'clock last night, the captain hoisted an ensign upside down, which is the recognised "she's in distress" signal. 2 steamers, although they passed only a quarter of a mile away, did not pay any heed, and to make matters worse, the condenser did not work. Engineer Nelson stuck pluckily to his post and, enveloped in the escaping steam, tried to rectify things. Shortly after 5, the crew of 8 launched a boat 20 foot long and abandoned the steamer. The Euroka drifted ashore near Manly. The decks were awash this morning, and the vessel seems firmly embedded in the rocks. It is understood that the vessel was insured for £3,500. Then on the 15th of November 1913, in the Newcastle Morning Herald and Miners Advocate from Sydney, it says the Marine Court held an inquiry today into the collision that occurred on the 29th of September between the steamers Euroka, owned by Valentine Geary Company Limited, and Caraba. On the 2nd of September 1914, in the Australian Town and Country Journal of Sydney, it says reports from Oberon state that Valentine Geary has visited operations at the Dad's Millions mines in Brisbane Valley and has applied for 2 gold mining leases. He's making great preparations for a start and has great faith in the proposition, which will be in full swing in a short time. On the 23rd of September 1914, in the Lithgow Mercury, we're informed that Mr. T. Deegan of Dad's Millions fame is installing machinery and again getting things in working order for a start. Mr. Valentine Geary, the South African mining expert, is at present on a visit to the mine. The result of his inspection will be awaited with interest. On the 22nd of August 1919, in the Newcastle Morning Herald and Miners Advocate, an application was made by Valentine Geary to enter a piece of land for the purpose of prospecting for coal. The applicant said there were 50 acres of land upon which buildings had been erected for mining operations. The land was not under cultivation and required the whole of the surface to be stripped for mining. He'd agreed that the company is to pay 1 shilling an acre without surface damage or participation in profits. The application was granted for 6 months at 1 shilling per acre and no compensation. On the 27th of May 1920, in the Gosford Times and Wyong District Advocate, it says that the oxide mine at Karangra, I understand from the owner, Mr. Valentine Geary, that disposal of the output is assured and that the matter of its production and treatment is the only drawback. Matters are gradually assuming larger proportions, and quite soon the mine and factory will be in full swing. So in 1930, they were living at Karangra, which was near Gosford, New South Wales, on the Hawkesbury, in a home called Sunshine, still using his middle name, Valentine, as his Christian name. His occupation was listed as a mining investor. With land that Henry owned in Newcastle, a suburb was named after him, Valentine, on Lake Macquarie. Henry died at their family home in August 1933 at the age of 65. The Sydney Morning Herald outlined his death. Mr. Valentine Geary died suddenly at his home, Sunshine, Hawkesbury River, last Sunday. He was the eldest son of the late Mr. Joseph Geary, an inspector of schools in Victoria, who became a leading Melbourne journalist. He was educated at Melbourne University and subsequently engaged in extensive land transactions. The news of the gold discoveries eventually led him to Coolgardie, where he became a secretary of various companies. He successfully promoted a number of companies and in 1903 went to South Africa. 6 years later, he returned to Australia and settled in New South Wales, engaging in extensive mining operations. Mr. Geary is survived by Mrs. Geary and a daughter. On the 24th of August 1933, in the Gosford Times, the Wyong District Advocate, Mr. Kirkness, coroner, this week completed papers in connection with an inquiry conducted by him at Gunderman Creek, Hawkesbury River, on the 13th of August into the death of Henry Valentine Joseph Geary, aged 65 of Sunshine Farm, who passed away the previous night in his sleep. The coroner returned a verdict in accordance with medical testimony that the death was due to natural causes, heart failure. Mabel died in 1946 in Sydney at the age of 78. Her death notice states that she died on the 13th of June 1946 at Edgecliff. Mabel Sarah Phyllis Geary, widow of the late Valentine Geary and daughter of the late Charles William Gaylor of Victoria and dearly beloved mother of May. In part 2, I'll be covering May, their daughter, her life, as well as Henry Geary's siblings. If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.